This is a straightforward science fiction war narrative in the HFY tradition, exploring strategy, resilience, and the reshaping of perspective between two civilizations in conflict. It sits well within the genre, and I'll treat it with the same literary seriousness as the previous stories. Chapter summaries. Chapter 1, The Queen Who Had Already Won. Queen Merath of the Sorvani has run the war calculus 17 times, through 17 different modeling systems, and all 17 have returned the same conclusion. This is not a war. It is a correction. The Sorvani fleet is the largest assembled in 4 centuries. Her commanders are the finest products of a military tradition that has not lost a campaign in living memory. And the human civilization on the other side of the border corridor is, by every metric her strategists have developed, outmatched in every category that has ever decided a war. She gives the order with the quiet certainty of a person completing a formality. In a mid-tier, human strategic command posts that the Sorvani intelligence assessment has classified as a secondary target. A logistics and contingency analyst named Idris Fenn reads the first engagement reports, sets down his coffee, and begins writing a different kind of plan. Chapter 2, The Shape of the Resistance. The first 3 engagements go exactly as Merath's models predict. The 4th does not. The anomaly is small. A human convoy that should have been neutralized instead disappears entirely, along with the Sorvani intercept unit sent after it. The 5th engagement produces a different anomaly. And the 6th. The pattern that emerges is not heroic resistance or superior firepower. It is something her strategic models have no clean category for. An opponent who is fighting the war she planned rather than the one he has. Idris Fenn's name begins appearing in the intelligence reports in the specific way that names appear when an algorithm has started finding them in too many places. Chapter 3, The Mind Behind the Inconvenience. Merath requests a full strategic analysis of Fenn's methodology, because she is a queen who has won by understanding her opponents, and she has encountered something she does not yet understand. What the analysis returns is not a portrait of a military genius. It is a portrait of a man who has read her playbook more carefully than anyone on his own side and has constructed, from the available material, a response that is neither a counter-strategy nor a defense, but something more structurally irritating. A series of questions embedded in military actions, each one asking her to spend more than she planned in order to get less than she expected. He is not trying to win. He is trying to change the cost of her winning until the cost becomes a different kind of answer. Chapter 4, What the War Taught Her. The war does not end with a dramatic reversal. It ends with a negotiation that Merath enters having won, by every territorial and military measure, and exits having understood something her 17 models were not designed to calculate, that the most dangerous opponent is not the one who believes they can defeat you, but the one who has decided to make certain you remember them. The story closes on Merath and Idris Fenn across a ceasefire table, in the specific, charged silence of 2 people who have spent months trying to outthink each other, and are now, for the first time, in the same room. What she finds across the table is not what she expected. Neither, he admits, is she. Full story. Queen Merath of the Sorvani had a habit, when making large decisions, of asking herself what she was not seeing. It was a discipline she had developed early and maintained rigorously, because she had learned, through a combination of education, observation, and one significant miscalculation in her 2nd year of reign that she had never discussed publicly and thought about constantly. That certainty was not the absence of doubt, but the management of it. A leader who did not doubt was not confident. They were simply unaware of the shape of their own ignorance. She had applied this discipline to the war calculation 17 times. She had run it through every modeling system her strategic core possessed, stress-tested it against every historical analog her archivists could locate, and subjected it to the kind of adversarial review that her senior commanders had learned to treat as a compliment. All 17 iterations had returned the same result. She had then asked herself what she was not seeing, had found no satisfactory answer to the question, and had concluded that the absence of a satisfactory answer was itself information. The order went out on a morning that was unremarkable in the way of mornings that precede things, indifferent to what they are about to precede. The Sorvani fleet moved with the precision of a thing that had been prepared for a long time and was now simply doing what it was prepared for. Her commanders were excellent. Her ships were the finest her civilization had produced. The humans on the other side of the border corridor had courage and numbers that were not negligible, and technology that her assessments had rated honestly and found outmatched in the specific categories that wars were decided by. She did not underestimate them. She had simply estimated them accurately, which was a different thing. She watched the first engagement reports from the strategic command tier with the focused calm of someone supervising a process they have designed well. It proceeded as designed. She asked herself one more time what she was not seeing. Somewhere on the other side of the border, in a prefabricated command post that the Sorvani intelligence assessment had classified as a secondary target and designated for the third wave of operations, a man named Idris Fenn set down a coffee that had gone cold while he read the first engagement data, picked up a stylus, and began writing on a blank planning surface. He wrote for 4 hours without stopping. The fourth engagement was the first one that did not go as modeled. It was a small thing, technically, a supply convoy that the intercept unit reported as isolated and confirmed and then stopped reporting on. The intercept unit did not check in at its scheduled time, nor at the secondary window, nor at the emergency frequency. It was found, 2 days later, intact and confused at coordinates that placed it 3 sectors from where it should have been, its navigation systems having been persuaded to take a very specific detour by a means that the technical analysis team spent a week attempting to fully reconstruct. The convoy was not there. Marath read the report with the attention she gave to things that didn't fit. She noted it, filed it in the category of anomalies that required monitoring, and returned to the larger pattern, which was proceeding correctly. One anomaly was a data point. It required a second to become a pattern. The second came 5 days later, and then the third. The pattern that emerged was not, she recognized, the pattern of an opponent fighting to win. It was the pattern of an opponent who had read her plan and was fighting it, not opposing the plan's execution, but inserting friction into it at specific points. The way you insert a small, precisely shaped object into a mechanism not to stop it, but to change the sound it makes and the energy it consumes. The operations were not winning anything. They were costing her something, not much each time, cumulatively more than the model had allocated. She requested an intelligence focus on the pattern's origin. The name Idris Fenn appeared in the preliminary report, with the specific frequency that names acquire when an algorithm has encountered them in too many unconnected places to consider coincidental. She read his file with the care she gave to things she had decided to understand. He was not a combat commander. He was a logistics and contingency analyst, a classification her military structure did not have a direct equivalent for, which was itself a piece of information. His background was in supply chain resilience and failure mode analysis. He had spent 11 years finding the ways that systems broke down and building workarounds before the breakdowns occurred. He had no combat record and no tactical training in any formal sense, and had, by her intelligence team's assessment, no business being as consequential as he was turning out to be. She thought about this for a long time. The full strategic analysis came back on the 22nd day of the campaign, and Marath read it alone, which was how she read things she expected to find significant. What it described was not a counter-strategy. It was not a defense. It was a methodology, a way of looking at her plan from the outside and identifying every place where the plan required her to spend more than the model had estimated, and then placing a human action at precisely that place. Not a blocking action, not an attack. A question. Each operation was a question embedded in a military form, and the question was always a version of the same one. Are you certain enough about this to pay more than you planned for it? Some of the questions she had answered yes. Some she had answered no and rerouted, and the rerouting had cost time. Some she had answered yes and found, afterward, that the cost had been higher than the certainty warranted. He was not fighting the war. He was auditing it. She sat with this characterization for a while and found it accurate, and found that accurate was an uncomfortable thing for it to be, which was information. He is not trying to win, her senior strategic commander said, in the briefing that followed. The commander's name was Verath, and she was the best tactical mind in the Sorvani military, and she had been visibly unsettled by the analysis in a way that Marath found more useful than reassuring. "No," Marath said. "Then what is he doing?" Marath looked at the probability charts, the original model and the revised model, the gap between them growing in the specific way of gaps that are being widened by someone who knows exactly which lever to press. "He is making sure," she said carefully, "that when this is over, the cost is a number I will remember. He is not trying to change the outcome. He is trying to change what the outcome costs me, so that I carry it as a different kind of answer." Verath was quiet for a moment. "That is a very long-horizon strategy for a man who cannot win the war." "Yes," Marath said, "it is." She thought about what she was not seeing. The ceasefire negotiation was conducted in a station at the border corridor's midpoint, neutral ground in the technical sense, which meant that both sides were equally uncomfortable and expressed this through the medium of formal procedure. Marath attended in person, which was not required and which her advisors had noted was unusual for a campaign at this stage. She had not explained her reasoning to them. She had not entirely explained it to herself. The human delegation entered from the eastern corridor. Idris Fenn was at its center, not its senior diplomatic figure, who was a career negotiator named Hollies with the careful bearing of someone used to being the most important person in rooms about process. Fenn was adjacent to this, which was where, she understood, he tended to be, not the formal center, the actual one. He was not what she had assembled from the intelligence portrait. The portrait had given her a mind, the shape of the thinking, the methodology, the 11 years of failure mode analysis converted into military inconvenience. It had not given her the person attached to the mind, because intelligence portraits rarely did, which was their consistent limitation. He was not young and not old, and had the particular quality of stillness of someone who spent a great deal of time in his own thinking, and had become comfortable there. He looked at her across the table with the direct, unperformed attention of a man who had spent the last several weeks trying to understand how she thought and was now, for the first time, seeing the source material directly. She was aware of looking at him with the same quality of attention for the same reason. The formal proceedings opened. The senior negotiators performed the ceremony of it. Marath participated correctly and watched Fenn in her peripheral attention, which was how she watched things she was still assessing. At the break, across a side table, while the delegations reconfigured themselves for the second session, he spoke to her directly. "I want to ask you something," he said, not a negotiating gambit, a genuine inquiry. "Ask," she said. "The fourth engagement," he said. "The convoy. My team was certain you would reroute rather than pursue. You pursued. I've been trying to understand why." She looked at him. He was asking because he wanted to know, not because the answer was useful. She recognized this because it was how she asked questions. "Because I wanted to understand what you were doing," she said. "The pursuit was expensive. The information was worth the cost." He was quiet for a moment. "That's what I thought," he said. "I couldn't confirm it from the outside." "You could have," she said. "You almost did in the 7th operation." He looked at her with the attention of someone updating a model. "The supply depot," he said. "Yes. I thought that was a coincidence." "It was not," she said. The second session was about to begin. Around them, the formal machinery of the negotiation reassembled itself with the efficient courtesy of people who understood that their job was to build a structure around whatever had already been decided by the people actually deciding things. "You won the war," he said, not concessions, statement of fact. "Yes," she said, "but not the way the model said." "No," she said, "not the way the model said." He nodded slowly. She had the specific impression of someone who had spent a long time building toward a question, and had now received an answer that was satisfying not because it was what he had hoped for, but because it was true. "For what it's worth," he said, "I wasn't trying to win." "I know," she said. "I know exactly what you were trying to do. It took me 11 days to understand it and another 9 to accept that I understood it correctly." She looked at him directly. "You were trying to make sure I came to this table carrying the real number." He met her eyes. Did it work? She thought about 17 models and the gap between them and the cost that the gap represented, which she had in fact been carrying since the 14th day and would carry, she suspected, for considerably longer. "Yes," she said. The session opened. They returned to their respective sides of the table, and the formal proceeding resumed around them, building the architecture of a ceasefire that would hold or would not hold depending on what the people in the room had understood about each other. Marath sat with the real number and found it, as intended, difficult to set down. Across the table, Idris Fen arranged his notes and did not look up, but she had the clear and specific sense that he knew she was thinking about it, and that this was, from his perspective, exactly what it was supposed to feel like. She had run her war calculation 17 times and asked herself what she was not seeing and found no satisfactory answer. She had found it now. It was sitting across a ceasefire table with a stylus and a career in failure mode analysis, and it was, she concluded with the honest precision she had always required of herself, the most consequential thing her models had failed to calculate. Not the strategy, the mind behind it. And the particular quality of mind that spends 11 years learning how things break down in order to build something that doesn't, not a weapon, not a countermove, but a question that the other side has to carry home. She would carry it home. She already knew she would think about it for a long time. This, too, she suspected, had been the point.